Hey everyone, thank you for coming back to Eat and Talk. Today I have Ayub here with me, joining us. Ayub, thank you for coming.
No problem.
Happy early Eid Mubarak. By the time you guys are watching this, it's way past Eid, but I hope you had a great Ramadan.
Thank you.
And yeah, we have Ayub here today because we are raising awareness for Autism Month. And Ayub is a founder of an autism center, and we really are just going to kind of talk about some of the ins and outs of what it's like, running an autism center and some of the disparities and some of the blessings that come with it. So yeah, let's get into it. But before we do that, I just want to introduce you, Ayub. Tell us about yourself, about your background. Yeah.
Eid Mubarak to you as well. Happy Autism Awareness Month.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Ayub Ilmi. I am from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Born in Washington, D.C., raised in Minneapolis, and I've lived kind of everywhere. But yeah, I started my organization BTS, Beyond the Spectrum, a few years back. It's not really my expertise. I have a background in several different things.
Yeah, and can we talk about your background? Because your background is so cool. You guys, Ayub is one of the dopest people I know, and his background is very impressive. And that's why I think it's even so cool that he started Beyond the Spectrum, because he's really had a lot of pivotal moments in his life and touched amazing excellence. So can we kind of backtrack and talk about some of the cool things that you did, including your education?
Yeah. So I got my bachelor's degree in political science. I got my master's degree in political science as well. I went to undergrad in Ohio, Cleveland. Lived in Cleveland for about 5 years. I think besides 1 year that I studied abroad over in London. And then I moved to New York City. I worked at MTV News and MTV for about a couple years between MTV and Viacom, which is the parent company. So yeah, I was in production for a few years, which was dope. Got to kind of be in the news industry and at the same time kind of the music industry while I was living in New York, which was a great experience. I mean, the money wasn't great, but the experience was great for sure.
Yeah.
Got to meet a lot of dope people, work on some cool projects. And then that kind of pushed me to go back to school, just work in the corporate world. It's not the funnest situation, just in general, not even regards to pay, just how corporations are, 9-to-5s are. But it was a great experience, and I learned a lot from it. But yeah, pushed me back to get my master's degree in international relations, political science. I did that at this school called LIU, Long Island University in Brooklyn, who had they have like a United Nations program. So I got a master's in international relations, and then I got a graduate certificate in UN studies, and then that kind of pivoted me into the work that I ended up doing, which is like human rights work, diplomacy work. So I worked for some NGOs, worked at the UN for a bit with the NGOs, and worked on a bunch of different stuff like human rights stuff, disarmament, sustainability, conflict resolution, peace building, all that cool stuff. Kind of with a concentration in Africa. Did that for a few years, and then did that at the same time as I was studying. And then once I finished my degree, I continued doing that. And then yeah, I moved back here end of 2020. And then while I was working at my job in New York, I didn't tell them that I left. I just act like I stayed in New York. And then, yeah, I started working on BTS, Beyond the Spectrum, kind of working from home and working on opening up this center. And yeah, that's kind of my background.
Yeah, that's like I said, super, super impressive background. I want to backtrack a little bit. I kind of want to know what were some key takeaways that you took in life through your journey of, working in corporations and even going through school and even having to like relocate a few times. Like you went from Cleveland to New York with the background of growing up in Minnesota. Like, how did you survive as like a young Black Somali Muslim man, you know, making all these transitions and changes?
That's a good question. I mean, I think surviving as in like, how did I just like,
Yeah, because like, you know, you're by yourself. These are big pivotal changes in your life. Like how did you know what the next step was? How did you feel? How were you able to maneuver? I know survive is like a very dramatic word.
No.
But
I get it. Now I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, the places that I was at, you know, to my core, I'm Somali and I'm always Muslim first, but like to the places I was living at, like they didn't know what Somali was. So I wasn't Somali to them. I was just probably Black or African, Muslim always. So I think always like knowing, even though like I was pivoting and doing different stuff, like it kind of all connected somehow. And I kind of always knew what I want to do. You know, just being, you know, entrepreneurial based, kind of having that business mindset. And even when I'm working with corporations or working with organizations, just making sure that it's always like purposeful work and stuff that makes me happy, that I feel like I'm doing something, or I'm doing something for humanity or for people. And I feel like anytime that I wasn't, that was usually the push that I needed to like stop doing that. So always working towards that. Even when I was working at these other organizations, even if I wasn't working for myself, I always kind of still was an entrepreneur. I had a clothing line throughout this whole process. Even
I was gonna say, are we gonna skip that? Because the clothing line was a pretty big part of like your journey, and it was super cool.
Yeah, so clothes has always been like my passion. You know, I have several passions, but I think just fashion has always been a bit of a passion of mine, or kind of realizing that that we are like the tastemakers, and we are the ones that kind of are the ones that say what's in and what's out, and what's nice and what isn't. And I think just always understanding that, like, you know, not in like a boastful way that like I know more than these people, but once you get into a lot of these buildings, you notice that these people don't really know anything.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the culture, when it comes to what you like. And then you realize that these are the people that are like pushing the pen forward or pushing the needle, and it's like, okay, these people don't really know anything. They're just trying to keep up with the Jones, or just trying to figure out what's norm or what's going on right now. So once you kind of realize that, and you realize that like you're the one that kind of gives them inspiration, like your people, and like what you do is like what's in, you know. I think people are starting to realize that like, some other people are like kind of like in now, but like, you know, I feel like we've always been in, you know. So
that is so true. It's almost like trending.
Exactly. So understanding that, like, you know, Minneapolis gave me that. You know, some of the other cities that, you know, I have family in, that I grew up, you know, spending summers in, kind of gave me that backbone as well. So understanding that for sure helped me survive in those areas. But just always knowing that like it's a different from, I feel like in my younger days, I always felt that like I was one step away from kind of doing what I wanted to do, but I might have not known what that step is. And then I think the older you get, you start like through growth and experiences and through life lessons and just, you know, falling, getting up, all of that, you start understanding like what that step is. And there's probably no better feeling than like understanding that like, okay, I can identify what that step is. Like, this is what I'm trying to do, identifying it, realizing, okay, this is what I need to do to get there, and then getting there. And then, so like when you're younger, you're kind of like, you know, people will be like, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that. And it's like, okay, but how do you do that, you know? And then understanding like how to do it. So yeah, I think in my younger days, I was just trying to figure out I knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it. And then once I understood how to do it, just working towards that step.
Yeah. And I love how you did everything that you wanted to do, you know, and like you went from, well, you know, education, like you went to school, like you did that, you moved, you did that. You were working at MTV and production and music and journalism, like you did that. And then you went into fashion. So like, how were you able to, I guess like gain confidence into each of these fields as you like entered them?
I don't.
Or if you even did. Or was it just kind of like,
it's a good question. I mean, I think naturally, I'm probably a confident person, but I think going into these different fields, it humbles you. And you realize that like you really don't know as much as you think you know. You know, you might have the inspiration and you might have the confidence and you might have like the story and the vision for all of these things, but then, you know, what these other people are definitely better than me at is like kind of putting pieces together, you know, being organized, being able to like figure out how to bring stuff together, bring people together, work on stuff, work on projects. I think what helped me with these different places is like I've kind of seen it how to, you know, like work on bigger scales. You know, I've been around places that like there's $1 million budgets or $1 billion budgets, and then I'm going to, you know, working on these IGOs and these organizations like the UN, and you know they have, you know, millions of dollars to try to solve world issues, but obviously they're not really solving this stuff. But you know, they're putting it into research, they're putting it into all these things, and you know, I was a part of these organizations that they were giving money to like try to figure stuff out. So I think kind of seeing it on that type of scale kind of helped me out too. But at the same time, I think what we're starting to realize, even back then, it was like at a time that the world was kind of changing. Everything was kind of becoming more, you know, nuclear and like center and like less big and less budgety. And like, you know, even when it comes to like production or film, it's like, you know, give me a microphone, give me a camera, go outside, do this, do that. And I was there for that. Like I was there for the change of like big budgets to like, you know, I was a part of the social media department where they would give us a phone, give us a camera, and give us a microphone and go outside, go do this, go to Washington Park, go find this person. You know, we're going on tour with people, we're going to these studios with people, and like, you know, we're just kind of 1-2 people doing our thing. And then, yeah, so kind of seeing it that way, like realizing that you don't need a lot, even though you do need a lot, like connections and all that is cool, but just seeing it in different levels, and then going back and like doing it in like a more smaller level when we're doing our own stuff, whether it's like clothes or whether it's, you know, events or whatever it is. Like we kind of get the game from them, and then we kind of do our own thing on a smaller level, but like it feels bigger than they were even doing it, just because you feel like you're touching more people, friends, families, people you don't know are getting involved. And I think just kind of being able to do it on like several different levels helped me out. I think at the beginning I probably didn't have the confidence, but then, you know, some things won't work out, and then maybe, you know, you'll have a platform to do something, and then it'll do really well, and people are telling you, oh my God, you did so well. And then you're like, okay, kind of get a little bit of a booster of that and just running with that. But what it kind of taught me, I think, which ended up leading me to where I'm at now, is like everyone's kind of getting away from that. Like it's, you know, these corporations, whether it's production or whether it's politics or whether it's film, like they're investing in, you know, people like us. They're finding think tanks, they're finding small production companies, they're finding, you know, people that are good on camera, good on the microphone. They're giving them the budgets, they're letting them do their thing, and then they're gonna just stamp it and put their name on it, you know. So I think once we realize that like we kind of have the power, it's easier to like go out there and, I guess, like go against the grain or fight the beast or fight the corporation. Not fight them, but just do your own thing and actually like think that, you know, it can work out for you, you know, which I've seen it with several of my friends that like just did their own thing, and, you know, now the sky's the limit for them, you know? So.
And I say that because like, especially in our culture, the norm is becoming a doctor or engineer or a teacher. So the way that you were able to step into these different industries and really learn and figure out ways to like navigate and then also take things back to kind of bring you to like where you are today, I think is really inspirational. So that leads me into saying, so where was the transition from all of those amazing things and how you got into Beyond the Spectrum and your passion for finding an autism center?
Yeah. So basically around like COVID, not around COVID, in the midst of COVID, I was living in New York, like everybody else, and at home like everybody else, and just dealing with COVID, not really like knowing what it was. So I guess let me backtrack a little bit. Right before COVID happened, I was coming home quite often. I just graduated from grad school in 2019, I think. Yeah, like right at the beginning of 2019, I finished my master's, and I think I just took a job doing some NGO work, some human rights work, and I was coming home a lot. My mom was um, my mom was selling our house in Minneapolis, like the house that I lived in when I lived out here back in the day, and basically my mom was selling the house, and my mom was kind of going overseas at the time. I think she was spending some time in Turkey, and her and my family kind of just packed up and left before they sold the house. So I was kind of just finishing what needed to be finished. So I was coming home on the weekends, um, and I was just spending a lot more time here, and all my family was gone, so I was kind of out here dolo. But I had some other family here that I ended up spending some time with, and one of the kids in my family that um, they were on the spectrum, and they started going to an ABA facility. So around that time, I was coming home and I was like kind of remodeling my mom's house, getting ready to put it on the market, and then I'm dropping off my family member to their um, ABA therapy center. So I went there a couple of times. I didn't really go inside, and then one day I had to go inside. And when I went inside, like I seen it, it was like really big, and the lady that was running it was this white American lady, and like she was super nice. But when I walked in, I noticed that like there was like 30 kids in there, and I seen a lot of kids of color, seen a lot of East African kids, and then the whole staff was white. Like everybody was white. There was one Somali girl that was working there at the time that I ended up talking to eventually and getting more information from her. But so I came in. First, I was just like, I'm like very observant, so I seen that and I was like, okay, this is interesting. But what kind of threw me off is like the demographic of the place, like didn't really add up,
It wasn't culturally aligned
at all.
Yeah.
Especially for being in Minnesota, it just didn't make sense to me. So, but I ended up going back quite often. I ended up befriending the lady that runs it, and I was just like kind of just grilling her in a positive way, just asking her a lot of questions, asking her about ABA. So she was really cool. She was telling me everything, and I was asking her about like the demographics of the people that she sees and where they from, and she was saying, yeah, we've been like seeing a lot of East African kids and all of that, and I'm like, well, you don't really have the staff. She was like, I've tried. I don't, like it's not that I don't want to hire them. I just haven't really had the chance to. We have this one girl, yada yada. So me and her end up talking, and we become cool, whatever. And after a while, I just kept asking her some more questions, and basically I was like, what would I have to do to open this up? She kind of told me what I would have to do, and it was kind of a lot. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, well, I'll be back and we'll talk some more. So what ended up happening is I took a job overseas. Now this is like, end of 2019. I'm still coming home. I sold my mom's house, but I'm coming home and living in New York. And I took a job overseas, and the contract was 1 year. And I was about to be in Africa, East Africa, to be honest, like doing what I got my degrees in. And it was like a contract through like, it was like a contract not through the government, but like the organization I was working with got an award from the government, so they kind of, it was like a subcontractor to the government. So basically, I accepted the contract, and I did everything, and they were like, okay, this was like January now of 2020, and they're like, okay, you're gonna leave in the spring. So I still haven't left my job, and then like a month and a half later, the world shut down. I happened to be in Minnesota when like the world shut down, I think. And I'm talking to my recruiter that hired me, and they're like, yeah, don't worry, like at most you're gonna be pushed back a month and yada yada. But make a long story short, before the world shut down, what I decided is, okay, I'm gonna take this job. And it was one of those scenarios that like I really wasn't gonna spend a lot of money. I was going overseas. I was about to be in Africa. They were paying for my crib. They were paying for my travel. It was like 12 months contract. Every 3 months you get a couple weeks off, and it was good. So my plan was, I basically went back to the lady and I was like, I'm gonna open this up. Like, what do I need to open this up? She told me, and I was like, okay, well, this is how I have the funds. This is how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go to Africa for a year. I'm gonna stack up, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna open it. She's like, that's a great idea. Cool. So I ended up talking to her and kind of convincing her to kind of,
Coach you.
yeah, not necessarily coach me, but I kind of needed her to like sign off on my business. Like she had to be on my business with me, because I don't have all the credentials to open that up, right? I have a master's, but not in that. So she was like, yeah, I'm down to do that, yada, yada. So cool. So I got that out the way. Make a long story short, I never went to Africa. They kept telling me, you're going to go next month, and that month never happened. Alhamdulillah, I didn't quit my job. And what I ended up doing is just, I was still back and forth from New York and Minnesota, still living in New York. And then like that fall, 2020 fall, I was like, all right, I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm just going to move to Minnesota and I'm going to really just do this. Like, it didn't work out, but maybe this just means that I'm going to do this now instead of then. So I came back home. October of 2020, I like made my LLC, and then like that, before the end of the year, I applied for the license to open up ABA center, and I got the lady to kind of co-sign me, and then I just did a bunch of trainings and a bunch of different certifications, and basically I did everything she told me to do. I kind of got unlucky though in the process because when I like applied for the license, it was at a time that the laws were changing. Yeah. And before I like when I submitted my application, the laws didn't change, so like I was good. But then since I didn't get approved by the time the laws changed, basically what ended up happening is like they waited like 6 months, and then like 2021 came around sometime like that spring or summer, and they basically sent my application back and they were like, hey, since you're not you don't have a license here and you're not approved, these new laws apply to you. So basically like send back your application, you got to do it all over again. And the thing that they were requiring was like something that I didn't even have, you know? So I had to go back to the drawing board, try to figure out how I could get what they're asking me to get, you know? Time went by, alhamdulillah, I found it. Eventually that in 2021, end of 2021, I resent it, and then I got approved in 2022.
Wow. That's a long process.
It was, yeah.
Wow.
And I didn't even open up in 2022. After I got approved in 2022, I got approved in like spring of 2022. And I thought like, okay, I'm approved. They said I'm good. Like I can open now and let me find some kids and yada, yada. Like, no, that's not what happened. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not saying that's how it is for everybody. Other people, depending on like, you know, what their situation is, can be a lot different than me. But like for me, it wasn't that way. I basically started the process in 2020 and I opened up January of 2023.
Yeah. Yeah, probably because of like your background and especially in 2020, the laws were very like strict and everything was just pushed back and everything.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. This is at a time that like these people were always at the office and now everyone's at home. But that's not really why it happened. I think I know why it happened. It was just because the laws changed. Once the laws changed, finally by the time that I opened, I mean, by the time I got my license, I opened like 8-9 months after that. And the reason why is just because
I mean, there's more work to be done too. Yeah, it's not easy.
You got to find employees. You got to find clients. You know, you got to make sure the space that you're in is suitable for what you're trying to do. Like, you know, so it was tough. Like I was paying for a space for over 18 months without even being open. You know, I was paying that lady that signed off on me. She still wanted her money. I was paying her without being open, you know, so like, and so it was tough. So by the time I opened, it was like
lots of money and time and just a lot spent.
A lot of energy and yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But now you're open, alhamdulillah. You got open. You're able to get employees, able to get some kids. So tell me about that next chapter after opening.
Yeah. So we opened about 14 months ago. Got even the kids thing was kind of interesting because I didn't realize the kids thing was going to be like so intricate. Like, you know, I'm meeting up. Basically, I was just going around to moms and dads selling myself to them, you know, every day.
Because you're coming from like an entrepreneurial like background with, of course, like having a sense of passion because you've you have, you know, relatives and you've seen throughout your life this, but yeah, you had to kind of take your skills, but in a completely different atmosphere.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, now for sure, like I'm very well versed. I know, you know, probably as much as anybody that has been in the field. But yeah, back then it was kind of like a big learning experience. And I think the beginning was the hardest was just like, I'm going into these houses and I'm going into these homes and I'm basically selling myself, like literally, you know, not literally selling myself, but I'm selling my business to a mom or a dad who, you know, has a kid who's on the spectrum, and I'm trying to convince them that my place that's not open yet is going to make your kid better, you know?
How did you find, well, this is going to be a two-part question. One, how did you find these families that have, you know, kids that are on the spectrum? And two, it's pretty clear, like in our community, that there is a significant amount of children that are on the spectrum. But I would say, I don't know the exact statistics. I'm just pulling a number out my mind right now. But like a lot of families are in denial that their kids like are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Or they just kind of like wait way too later on, you know, in life, like when the kids adapt. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is how are you, I don't want to say like selling yourself, but how were you able to have these tough discussions with these families about like, hey, I want to help your kid. I have a center, or I have a space that we can educate them and we can help them build and grow. How did you find them? And then after you found them, how were these conversations discussed?
Yeah, no, it was tough. So at first it was very hard because I wasn't open. So telling someone to like invest in me without having any, like, I'm trying to convince these families to be the first. Like, hey, I'm good, but you're the first, you know? And that's tough for them. But honestly, at the beginning, it was just kind of word of mouth. I was just reaching out to my network and my friends, my family, anybody that I know, social workers, case managers, just trying to put the word out there like, hey, I got a center. I'm looking for some kids. You know, these are the things that I offer. These are the services that I offer. So for like 3-4 months, I was running around trying to find kids. I'm going to houses every week, daily sometimes. And, you know, it got to the point where for a couple of months, like, you know, I thought I had kids. Like I would, you know, meet the family. I would tell them everything we were going to do. I would sign them up, and then like, okay, you guys are going to start on Monday. And then like Monday would come around and it's like something happens, you know? Either they just somehow just don't want to come, or they just go MIA, or I'm going to Africa with my kid. They said Africa's going to help them, or all these different things. Right. So I kind of just had to like sit back and reevaluate, like what I was doing. And I was kind of like, I was being a little bit hard on myself because I'm like, damn, am I bad? Like, is it because that I don't know how to do this or what it is? But, yeah, so finally I kind of just switched it up. And then, what it was is like, I just had to get my first kid. Once I got my first kid and I was open, it's easier now because I can tell them, hey, come to my office, come check this out. I can
show you.
I can show, I can show what we're doing. I can show, you know, I can be a little bit more confident. I can, it was easier, but that first kid was very hard. It took like a long time to eventually get, and it took several times for like people to kind of just renege or flop on me and sell me a dream. And, you know, and that's a whole nother thing. Like, we could dive into it if you want, but we don't really have to. But yeah, I think another thing with me is like, I kind of just stopped. I think at the beginning I was like focused on like only working with our people, and it wasn't because only, it was just like what I was doing.
Right.
You know, I'm from Minneapolis. I'm in Minneapolis. I'm going around Minneapolis, St. Paul, looking for kids, like East African kids. And like, I was like, you know what? Like, I don't even like, yeah, of course I want to help my community, but my community is Minnesota at the end of the day, you know? And, you know, like, I'm Somali and I'm Somali to the bone, but like, I'm American as well, you know? And like my background, I have friends from all walks of life. I have employees from all walks of life. So it was like, I kind of just switched up my whole game plan, and once I did that, it worked. Like my first kid was East African, but right now majority of my kids are not East African, you know. And the ones that are, like, you know, like I love them and I treat them like family, and I treat the ones that are not the same way. But yeah, at the beginning it was tough, but
because like when you're focused on like one, kind of regional cultural group, it is harder, but you lose focus. But kids are kids, and there's so many people you can help.
Kids are kids, and they need help regardless. But like with our community specifically, like there is a big disconnect. It is taboo. It is like, just hearing all these different things from all these parents, like how they look at it, like and it's like no, like some of the kids I'm getting, they're like, oh yeah, they can't talk, or they're non-verbal, or no, they're just non-vocal. Like I have kids that they said they can't speak, and now they're speaking full sentences. Like they won't stop saying my name and screaming. It's so it's just kind of how it was at the beginning. But eventually, like I got a grasp of it. I kind of understood the dynamics and the playing field. And obviously I'm a smaller business. I'm competing against big organizations that have hundreds of employees, hundreds of kids, multi-state corporations. There's like the Frasers of the world and all these other ones that we still have to work along with each other. But it was tough at the beginning, but eventually I think for me, like my mindset always, like, I think since it was like I had to like work so hard for it to like get open, that process kind of like taught me a lot, and it gave me a lot of patience, and like by force, like my name is Ayub, and it's like you would think I would have patience, but I really didn't, but life makes you become patient because you don't really have much of a choice. And just like understanding the time, understanding the process, realizing everything that I went through to even get it open, it just made it like my baby, almost like I just had to like really like protect my business, protect the kids that come there, protect everything, in a sense that like, it wasn't about like my first year. I could have got 20 kids if I wanted and just been like, oh, I got 20 kids and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. But like, I wouldn't have been doing the real like work. I wouldn't have been giving them proper care. I just would have been chasing money, and that's another thing that I've noticed with like a lot of that industry in general is like, it's either like kind of, you're really in it, or you're kind of just in it on that side of it, and I really just try to stay away from that side. So once I kind of started looking at it that way and just been like, okay, like I'm not even tripping. Like if I go talk to this family, if they want to come, they'll come. Like I ended up like breaking down statistics in my head of being like, for every 10 kids, like every 10 families I sit down with, maybe I'll get 2 of them or 3 of them. So now when I'm sitting down with all these families and I don't get them, I'm not even mad. I'm walking out of there thinking I probably didn't get them. You understand what I'm saying? So I wasn't really tripping over it.
But just even having those surface-based conversations, whether they decide to come to your center or not, at least it kind of, you leave there with, maybe at least leaving an impression.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Or even if they take their kid somewhere else, it doesn't matter. And their kid is getting help.
And that's another thing. Like I was educating a lot of these families. Like a lot of the families that I was coming across to, like I was the first person they've ever talked to about this. They didn't know what ABA therapy is. They didn't know anything. Their kid was in school and was having a hard time, and the schools are calling them every day saying, pick up your son, or your daughter did this, or your daughter did that. And it's like, this kid should be in school right now. Like, or maybe should only be in school for like half a day, So I'm like trying to educate these family members and kind of tell them like what's going on and why they're having these issues. And then I can see why they're having these issues. I'm sitting down with the mom and I'm watching the kid, and I see what the problem is. I see everything that's going around him. Like I see that, he's on his iPad the whole time, and every time she takes it away, he's like breaking walls. And I understand what it is. Like, so yeah, like just really educating them and kind of like understanding where they're at and having them understand where we're at, and just really seeing like how it meshes. And, fast forward now, it's like, alhamdulillah, but, like obviously our business is online. People call me every day off Google, or people get our numbers from other people. And like, when they reach out to me, one thing I promise to myself, whether any kid comes to our organization or doesn't come to our organization, any family member that reaches out to me, like whether I decide to take them or don't take them, like I'm gonna get them help, whether it's through us or through somebody else. I always tell them that. That's the first thing I say. Like, hey, they'll call me like, hey, I'm looking for this or I'm looking for that. And like, once we speak for a little bit and they tell me a little bit about their kid, and I speak to the family members, I'm just like, well, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to work with you, but regardless if I'm not going to work with you, I promise you that I'll help you find somewhere that will work with you, And like, that's kind of something I just kind of promised to myself, and I stick by that. But yeah, now alhamdulillah, like majority of the people that do reach out to me, I probably don't take. And one, it's not because that I don't want them, but one, it's got to make sense for the kid. It's got to make sense for us. Like if I'm speaking to the family and I'm reading some of this kid's stuff, and this kid might need intensive services. Like maybe this kid doesn't even need ABA, he needs this, and it's like somebody might have referred them to us, but it's like, okay, you can come here, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to be really giving you the care that you need. Like I'm not a daycare.
So there's like different levels.
There is different levels of autism. There's different levels of the spectrum. There's different levels of like there's intensive services that some kids can get from other providers. And you just have to be real with yourself. And with me, it's like I'm gonna help you regardless. But
so who does that evaluation? Like you do, or do they have to go through another evaluation then they get the referrals?
Yeah. So majority of the people that reach out to me, they've already had like a psych evaluation done. Whether it's through the county or their doctor, or some people go to like these bigger behavioral health clinics like Fraser's and Minnesota Autism. You can get psych evals from most of those places. Then if you're a kid that's at least the age of 3, you have a IEP, like an educated, individualized educated like plan, like a school plan. And that's another thing that will kind of tell you a lot about the kid and tell you a lot about maybe their home setting and some stuff that works for them and doesn't work for them. Because even if they're in school, they probably were in school for a little bit if they're not. So like you can kind of see it through that too. But for me, like I have kids on all level of the spectrum, like, and some of my kids, like, yeah, they were the kids that these other places wouldn't take. We did take, and mashallah, they're doing great, So it's not even about that for me. I try to make sure that I have like kids of all ages, kids on different levels of the spectrum. So I'm like able to like use art therapy in all different formats, and I can understand it doesn't matter where they are, that like we can help them. And it kind of helps us, like, because, these kids are going to graduate, or these kids are going to move forward, and hopefully they don't need ABA for the rest of their lives, So, but I'm going to get another kid that probably had similar background as they did. So just making sure that like our business is set up to handle it, our therapy set up to handle it, our employees are set up to handle those type of kids, all types of kids. So, but yeah, it teaches you a lot. But with like specifically in the East African community, I think it's interesting because when you go into some of these homes, or I don't really even go into homes anymore. They usually come to me. But when I'm meeting the families, they're kind of two ways. Like they're mashallah, and like the mom knows probably just as much as I do about autism, and specifically like not obviously she probably knows more because her kid's autistic, but like even about like therapy, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what triggers them, what doesn't trigger them, some of the stuff that they've tried at home. Like basically like their parents are either really, really good and involved, or it's kind of just kicking them in the butt. And one thing that people don't understand, that these kids that are on the spectrum, it affects them because they're the ones with autism, but like it affects like the families the most, like the kid's okay with it. He lives with it. She lives with it. They've had it probably since they can remember, they don't know anything else, but the families are the ones that it really affects. It takes a toll on the mom. It takes a toll on the father. And more times, there's other kids in the house. So it's not just this kid,
True.
So you could have a 6-year-old kid on the spectrum, but then there's another 3-year-old, and there's a 10-year-old, and there's a 12-year-old. And it's like, it's a lot, and it could be a single mom, or it could be a single father, or it could be a 2-parent home. It doesn't matter what it is. It's tough, you know? And I tell all these families that like, you need the help, because it really, like, it took a village.
Kids are already like without being on the spectrum, a lot to handle. Like you already need tons of help. So when they need a little bit extra more care, like I can only imagine. I feel like we need resources for all parents in general, so.
And that's the thing. Like when you talk to these families, they don't even know about these things. Like when they have a social worker, they have a case manager, they might have a caddy waiver. And like I'm telling them all these different providers that they can reach out to, or all these things that they're applicable to use or at their dispense, and they've never heard of it. You know, like how's your kid in school and you don't know that you can get speech therapy or OT, or how's your kid in you know, pre-K and you've never heard of ABA therapy, but you have all these, like, he's going to school, you have a social worker, you have a case manager, and like none of these people have told you, and the majority of it, well, that's how it is. What ends up happening is like they end up just, you know, like the kids are just having a hard time at home or having a hard time at school or the daycare or whatever it is, and they've been kicked out of this one and kicked out of this one and kicked out of this one, and somehow they heard about us. Or majority of the time they're not even looking for us, they're looking for like speech and OT. And then when they're looking for speech and OT, they end up finding us, and then they're like, oh yeah, I was looking for a speech therapist, and I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, I have speech therapy, but speech therapy is only for the kids that come to my center, you know. And they're like, oh, what do you do? And I tell them what I do, and they're like, oh my god, I've been looking for someone like you, like yada yada. And it's like, how have you never heard of us? You know, not even my center, but I'm just saying, how
in general, these services.
How have you never heard of ABA therapy? You know, so for us, like, one thing for me is like, we are in the inner city, so I do have a target market. The target market is kids that are from the inner city, you know, that wouldn't have this help, you know, that couldn't go to these places, that have never heard of it, that the mom or dad didn't know about any of this stuff before. And those are the kids that, like, I do my best to, you know, help. And those are the schools that, like, you know, I got kids from, you know, Minneapolis public schools, St. Paul public schools, and a few other areas, but majority of that. And most of my kids, they're from these areas, and those are the kids that I feel like, you know, I need to help the most, because one, even if they were on the spectrum, those are the kids that would have it the hardest out regardless. And then secondly, those are the same areas that I'm from. And third, it's like, these other places and these other kids, you know, they have these other insurances. Their parents have these resources. They've been doing therapy since they were 2-3 years old. And they just have it easier, you know? So like, that's who I do it for, is kids that really, you know, don't have a village, that don't have the help, and you can see how much it affects them already, and how much it helps their family. And like, the calls that I get every day, it's majority the same call. It's like, I can hear it in their voice every single time. It's 90% a very tired mom that's like on her last call. She doesn't know who else to call, and I can just hear it in her voice, like. And it's like, oh, I went to these people, I went to this people, I went to these people, and no one's saying this. They're saying this about my kid, they're saying this, and it's just like, and then I tell them the things that we can do for them, and they're just like, what? Like, you know, it's sad, but those are the ones that we do it for sure.
That's amazing. And that's really important, like groundbreaking value work that you guys do. Real quick, and maybe you don't have the answer to this. This might be something like a medical professional can answer, but why is the statistics so high in our community, especially the East African community, when it comes to kids on the spectrum?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it is a tough question to answer. Yeah. I don't even think that doctors can really answer it for you. I think all there is really just theories out there, because there hasn't been enough concrete evidence to back up theories. But like you were talking about the stats earlier, but yeah, I think right now in general in America is like 1 of every 36 Americans, white Americans, have autism. So in Minnesota, it's about the same. It's like 1 in 35 or 34. I want to say 8 girls are on the spectrum. So that means 1 out of every 34 kids, 1 of them has autism. White American kids. And then from there on, the stats vary. There's no population in America that has more autism than white American kids. But if you look at Minnesota, Somali kids have more autism than white American kids in Minnesota, which is kind of a bit alarming, and it's kind of like, how? So, if you look at the Hispanic statistics, it's not as much. If you look at African American statistics, it's not as much. If you look at any,
like other ethnicity.
yeah,
Yeah.
any people of colors statistics, it's not as much. The only one that has more is Somali, and I think right now, the last time I checked this, it varies, but it's 1 in 20 something. So
Wow.
we're probably at least like 10 more than them. So I would
Yeah.
say 1 in every 26 8 year olds
Hmm.
that are Somali have autism. Um, but yeah, the only thing that has been like proven to be for sure like a factor in it would be our and um, we all have it, everybody in this room, but is our very low levels of vitamin D.
Hmm.
So one of the number one, triggers and one of the number one factors of kids on the spectrum is if you look at them and if you look at their blood work and you look at everything that they have low levels of vitamin D. They all have vitamin D deficiency. And as Somalis in Minnesota, Somali Americans, kids, I'm sure you've taken several physicals and they've have written you some vitamin D supplements and told you,
Hmm.
hey, Yusada, you need to uptake your vitamin D.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the number one thing that I can kind of um, point at would be that is that Somalis have very, very alarming low level rates of vitamin D, and vitamin D is always um, one of the key factors of kids that have autism.
Hmm.
So, um, and if you look at places that have um, specifically people with melanin skin that have low levels of vitamin D are places like Minnesota,
Yeah.
places like Sweden, places like the UK, these very cold places. Kids of color have low vitamin D, and if you even go a little bit deeper into it, if you look at East Africans and where we are in the world, where we're from originally, and like what level we are of the equator, and how much natural vitamin D we would have gotten when we're in those places.
Hmm.
Um, and you bring us over here, like it's if you bring a Somali kid straight from Somalia and he's been there for 10, 15 years and he's got all the vitamin D in the world and all the natural sun in the world, and then he comes over here, give him 2 years and the doctor's going to say this guy
Yeah.
has very low levels of vitamin D even though he had natural sunlight for that long.
Hmm.
And then if you did the opposite and you take a white American person from Minnesota and you take them to Somalia and they're in the sun for a few years, they're gonna have very high levels of vitamin D to the point where they could even probably get sick or they could
Hmm.
even get burned or they could get skin cancer because their skin and their
It's too
body is
much.
not set
Yeah.
up for that where our bodies are. So we're in a place that naturally we're not supposed to be.
Hmm.
um, I think that is one of the bigger factors of that. And then after that, everything else is really just kind of up in the air. People don't know. People are trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's one thing that I would love to figure out. There's a few ways that I'm trying to figure it out. I would love to. There's a few people that I'm reaching out to possibly do some type of research, and if we can get the funds and try to figure out why this is happening. Um, but then yeah, then you can. Besides that, you can point it at some of the other stuff that everybody points at the reasons for autism, and it's just theory wise,
Right.
but people blame it on a lot of different things, whether it's vaccines or
Mhm.
whether it's all these other different stuff. But for me, I think why we are starting to see it a little bit more in the younger generation is like me and you were born here. Our parents are from Africa. Our parents were, regardless of when they came, I'm sure they had all the vitamin D in the world. And then we got here and, we were born here. So um, we probably had a lack of vitamin D as well. But now we're starting to get into 2, 3 generations of Somali Americans, right? Kids,
Mhm.
first generation, second generation Somali American kids are starting to have kids, right? So now we're looking at, people that have been away from where they're supposed to naturally habitat for decades, and they're the ones starting to have kids, you know. So maybe it wouldn't affect them as much when it's like, you know, fresh, like, you know, your parents just came here, had you, and you're good. But, you know, once you start getting into a few generations in, and I think, you know, environment is starting to be more important than genetics, and, you know, things start happening. And I think what's happening is we're becoming more like the people that are already here, and the people that are already here had a very high alarming rates of autism. And but where we're from, we don't have high alarming rates. So I think, yeah, our genes are just kind of, you know, wearing off, and we're starting to be more of like our environment.
True. No, that's a great answer. What advice would you give to those of us who are outside of the world of autism and spectrum, and how we can identify things in our kids or kids we work with at the schools or friends of family, whatever the case is? Like, what advice do you give on, you know, some things that we should look out for and how we should approach it, and how we can safely guide them to people like you, or, you know, an ABA therapist?
Yeah, for sure. One thing is, I think being in Minnesota really helps because, you know, this is one of the greatest healthcare states in the States.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I hate our healthcare.
It is. Besides the fact that we have, you know, the best hospital in maybe the world, we have a lot of healthcare providers, a lot of small healthcare providers, a lot of niche healthcare providers. So, you know, depending on what you're dealing with, you can find a niche clinic, a niche doctors that could really help you out. But specifically with ASD, some things that I would recommend is, one thing about Minnesota is, technically, legally speaking, you can't be diagnosed with ASD until the age of 7, right?
That's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah. You can't be diagnosed with autism until the age of 7. I believe, unless it was changed, it could be a little bit older, but I want to stick to 7. Which people would be like, oh, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. And the reason why I think it's a good thing is because you can be diagnosed with the symptoms of autism without being actually diagnosed with autism. So what that means is, legally speaking, if a doctor does a psych evaluation, they'll basically write all the stuff that you're displaying or your child is displaying, you know, and what that will do is that will get you the same medical help and give you access to the same providers as someone who does have ASD. But then what it also does is it doesn't put that in your medical history. It doesn't put that in the system. So what I mean by that is, the good thing about that, say you have a 2-year-old kid, a 3-year-old kid, and you're starting to see a little bit of signs of you know, some symptoms of autism, and more than likely you probably don't even notice it. Somebody came up to you and was like, hey, your kid's, you know,
Not speaking.
Yeah. Your kid's walking on their tippy toes. Your kid is having
meltdowns.
Or small seizures, or various different signs of autism. A lot of parents will be like, oh my God, you know, and they'll do the total opposite of taking them to a doctor and trying to figure it out. They might run to Africa, or they might keep them away from people, all of those things. No, take them to a doctor, get them a psych evaluation, because what ends up happening is, once you do that and the doctor sees some of those same symptoms, what they'll do is they'll put that in the paperwork. They'll say that you're having similar symptoms at ASD. And then what that allows you to do is, now at the age of 2 or the age of 3, you can put your kid in ABA therapy. You can put your kid in speech therapy. You could put your kid in OT. You don't have to get them any medicine, any DAWA, none of that. But now you're getting ahead of it, right? So the kids that have the most growth potential, the kids that have the highest level of, you know, self-sufficiency and all of the things that you would expect kids that don't have ASD to have, are kids that if they do have it, they started getting these services very early. So what that allows you to do is, okay, at 2 or 3, now you can send your kid to these places even before he gets to school. So say, oh, you're like, oh, I don't want my kid to miss school, or I don't want people to get ahead of him, and I want him to stay on pace of his age. Cool. At 2 or 3 years old, your kid's going to ABA therapy, and he can go to preschool, or he can go to ABA therapy without going to preschool. And then by the time he's in kindergarten or first grade, he's already in school, and you just had him doing 3 years of therapy. And now when it's time to do his IEP or psych evaluation at 7 or 8, the doctor doesn't even say he has autism, you know? Because why? Because you've gotten him the help he needs. You got him the therapy he needed. You worked on a lot of these stuff, you know, a lot of these developmental issues, these speech issues. And a lot of it, that's really what it is. Like when you're speaking of autism, autism is such a vague word. Like it describes so much. To be honest, I believe we all have a little bit of autism in us, because what does that even mean?
I agree 100%.
So
yeah,
what I mean by that is, you know, specifically with our community, especially people of color, East Africans, African Americans, all of that, when they hear that, they go out the back door, right? No, when you hear that, get that psych eval, get that IEP done, and get your kid the help he needs early. Because when you get him the help he needs early, by the time he's 7 or 8, and they would be having these meltdowns, or they would be showing these maladaptive behaviors, and you would be getting these calls from school every day saying, pick up your son, he did this, he did that. They're not doing that. Why? Because they know how to deal with their emotions. They know how to vocalize. They know how to verbalize. They know how to ask for things. They understand reinforcements. They understand point systems. They understand how to work with their peers. They know how to do all these things because they got the help they needed. And now also, they don't have that in their paperwork. You know, if that's what you're scared of, they don't have ASD on their system. It doesn't say that they're autistic. So even if they were, you might have stopped it, you know? And that's another thing people got to understand. Just like allergies, people grow into things and they grow out of them. My whole life wasn't allergic to a thing. And then one day at the age of 25, I ate an almond and almost died, you know? And when I went to my doctor and I'm like, what happened? He was like, you have an almond allergy. And I was like, when's the last time you ate almonds? I don't remember, but I do remember as a kid, I loved almonds. Yeah. Well, how old are you? 25. Yeah. This is around the age that you start growing into stuff and you're growing out of stuff. So be careful, take an allergy test. That means you're probably allergic to other things that you're not aware of. And I'm not saying autism is the same thing, but
no, it's true. I've even met adults who have recognized that they're autistic as an adult and they didn't grow up, you know, in their childhood being autistic or recognizing they're autistic, but in college they noticed a lot of things and that they were diagnosed as autistic in their 20s.
Exactly. So, and that's another thing that I've been really telling, especially Somali moms, is like, when you see these signs early, step in, get your child the help, because I promise you, if you start early enough, like legally speaking, your kid can go to ABA as early as 18 months. Can I do much ABA therapy with your child at 18 months? Surprisingly, yes, because a lot of the, you know, interactions and a lot of the stuff that we would be doing with a kid, you might even be considering just playing with a child, but we're sliding in our therapy through that, right? And for instance, we're like, okay, you're like, my kid's 6 and he's not speaking, and it's like, how does he vocalize? He doesn't. How does he tell you what he needs? He comes and grabs me and he points to something. Okay, that shows me he knows how to get what he needs.
He's communicating.
You know, he knows how to communicate. So all we got to do is just like get him and show him how to do it the proper way, right? And that takes a lot of, you know, trials and tribulations and all of those things. But people were like, they don't realize like how much potential their kids have, and they don't realize how much potential that they're stopping their kids from gaining by holding them back, you know? So what like at an early age, bring your kid to get help, and the earlier you bring them, the higher level of success, the higher level of growth, the higher level of communication, all of these things that they will show. And it might not do what you don't want them to do, which is being diagnosed with autism. I'd rather have my kid, you know, have the symptoms of ASD at the age of 2 and get the help they need.
Work through it, exactly.
And then actually by 10 years old, you're bringing your child for the first time who's not diagnosed with anything, but only knows how to do stuff their way, gets triggered by everything, doesn't know how to take turns, is addicted to their iPad, can't communicate, doesn't know how to share. And then now it's like, how do we outgrow these things, or how do we grow out of those things? And people don't understand that. I think people, what they fail to realize is that like they're so set on like what others are going to say about their child than really getting their child the help. It's like, you know, oh, so and so is going to earning us with Janine, or
they care so much about
you know
what other
I'm
people
saying?
think. Yeah.
And then it's just sad. And then what they also don't understand is that like, kids are sponges. So now, you know, if you're Somali or East African, you definitely probably don't have one kid, right? So you have a couple kids, and say the older one or the middle child has ASD or showing symptoms of ASD, and they're in the same household and they're in the same room as their other siblings that are younger or older or similar ages. Now this kid's going to be showing behaviors that are caused by the lack of therapy, and not understanding how to vocalize and just
And it's frustrating because they're trying to keep up with their siblings, but they're, you know, not organizing their thoughts in the same way that their siblings
so
are.
what ends up happening is now the other kid ends up showing the same behavior as the other child. And what they end up saying is like, oh, I have two kids that are on the spectrum. But no, you have one kid who might be on the spectrum, and you have another kid who's a little sibling who copies what their other sibling does all the time. But now they've been doing it for so long that by the time it's for them to go to school and they're getting their IEP, now they're going to be convinced that they do have autism, and they might even develop it because of their environment.
Yeah.
So I think what people need to understand is like they're holding their kids back by doing that, you know?
Yeah.
By misdiagnosing them, by not allowing them to be diagnosed with those symptoms, you know?
Yeah.
And then there's the total opposite of people that are saying their kid's autistic, but might not be, you know? And that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It's so crazy. I was like, we're going to talk for 30 minutes and we probably could talk for like 4 more hours about this subject. But we're going to wrap this up with, of course, love to welcome you back in the future, because I think this is a very important topic that our community like needs to continue having conversations about. And I really want to thank you for the services that you provide and the value that you bring to the community, or communities across. It's not easy. And thank you for, a lot of people can easily give up when you were going through those trials and tribulations, especially with all the paperwork and not being open for such a long time. So I really commend you for that. And my last question is going to be, you know, what can you leave with our viewers? Just any piece of advice, and it could be related to this topic, or it could just really be related to, you know, your life journey and not giving up and helping others. I know you dropped, like, you said so many amazing things, so it's like
I wasn't trying to, I promise.
No, it was amazing.
I guess just don't be scared. Don't be scared of failing. Don't be scared of for things not to work out. Like, always be willing to, as I say, try a thing. And what I mean by that is, like, you know, the whole first half of this, we spoke about like how hard it was, and yeah, it is very hard. But I just opened up my second location down in Rochester, and you know, we have 2, and inshallah I plan on opening more, whether it's in Minnesota, in other pockets, or different states, and all of that. And there's been times that I did want to give up, and there was times that, you know, I had to you know, swallow my pride and do certain things that maybe I would not have liked to done. And what I mean by that is, like, find what you want to do, and not to sound like touche and sound corny, and like I'm not
not at all.
motivational
We don't have
speaker
that
at
here.
all, because I'm the furthest thing from that.
But you could be.
But what I'm trying to say is, like, I think with what our people focus on too much, whether it's just, you know, any black people or African people or East African people, is like we like to do what we see works. And we don't like to do what we don't think works, you know? And I think that we should kind of stay away from that, and we should maybe leave that to like the older generations, our parents' generations, where they just do what they know works for them, you know? Like, and figure out what works for you. And when it's not working, don't stop. And keep working, because it eventually will work. And, you know, things are not supposed to be easy. Things are going to get hard. Things are going to get very difficult. You're going to be tested. I was tested so many times, whether it was through the state, you know, I was tested through, you know, colleagues, partners, employees, family members, you know, the government calling me, oh, if you don't give us this in 24 hours, you're not going to get this. And all of those things happen, and you will continue to be tested. But I think just figuring out what you want to do, like I was saying earlier, it's hard to keep going when you don't know what that next step is. Yeah. But when you like kind of give yourself a guideline, you give yourself an outline, and you understand what that next step is and working towards that next step, there's no better feeling than one when you achieve it. But the best feeling of that whole thing is actually knowing what the step is. Figure out what your step is. And once you figure out what your step is, you have something to work towards. And once you have something to work towards and you get to that step, it's not going to feel like what you thought it was going to feel like, because you're going to be like, oh, you're going to want like a euphoric feeling, and that's not what it's going to be. But the feeling that you're going to get is that you're going to understand that you can kind of do anything, you know? And once you understand that you can kind of do anything, what you'll stop doing less of is doing what you think works for others and start doing what works for you. Yeah. I get a phone call every single day about somebody who wants to open up an autism center. And I'm sure I make it look good, but it's not good, you know? Like, and I'm not saying this to like get people from stop doing it, but in 2020 or 2021, when, you know, I was trying to get it open, I wasn't hearing about anybody doing it, you know? And a few years later, you know, we're doing it. And, you know, I'm sure obviously like I have a social media page, and, you know, people probably see things online, and, you know, they reach out to me, and I'm never going to be a gatekeeper or like stop people from getting what they want to get, but I know you don't want it. So why are you doing it? You know, do something that you want to do something that means something to you. Otherwise you might as well just be in a corporation and just working towards something. The reason why I'm not is because I promised to myself several years ago that any work I do is going to be purposeful work, and it's going to mean something. It's going to impact something. It's going to impact my community. It's going to bring something good to the world. Even if it's clothes, I'm not going to make clothes that don't mean nothing. Yeah. You know, that clothes is going to represent me, represent my environment, represent my people, something. And any type of business that I do, and, you know, this won't be the last business I do, and I'm working on other businesses, it's going to be business that actually impacts me and my loved ones. And my loved ones, what I mean by that is my people, you know, not literally my family, my people, the people who I represent, you know, people who look like me, who come from my backgrounds, who come from my type of stories. So I really want us to like stop being so, what's the word I'm looking for? Trendy, you know, and start being more original. We're one of the most talented people in the world, and we can do anything in the world. But like I said, let's not be our parents' generation. Like, let's not be someone at Carmel who's neighbors with the person that's selling the same stuff as them. Yeah. Like, do something that is going to bring good to your people. And if you're in healthcare, do something that's going to bring good to your people. You know, you could call the state right now and ask them, what type of providers are we missing? What do we need more of? And if you want to only work with the Somali community or the East African community, you can find out what we need more of. You know, there's a lot of stuff that we need more of, you know. Let's stop diluting markets. Let's start actually to like put our good foot forward and try to bring good to our community. You know, like, it sucks because all I see is like a lot of negativity when it comes to our people and the same stuff, you know, like, and in Minnesota, it's like either our people are killing it,
I know, highs and lows,
or we're being killed,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And you see it in these other people's faces. You see how, like, I live in it every single day, you know? I'm not even speaking on, like, trying to break barriers or all of that, but, like, I live in it. These are the people that I work with every day, and they treat me accordingly of how they view me and my people. And then after they work with me for so long, then, yeah, maybe that treatment changes, but I'll always remember how that is because of, you know,
This
what
narrative.
they thought, you
Yeah.
know, like you can just go on Twitter and go on Crime Watch and see how they're talking about us. You know, it's sad. It's like, oh, do they own
The
a
pirate flags.
Yeah, you got the pirate flag, and they're like, oh, he probably owned a daycare, and it's like
Yeah.
they just all think that, like, you know, whereas we're doing so positive, but we're not. We're misleading a lot of people, and we're
Yeah.
misleading ourselves. So what I would tell anybody who's trying to do anything is don't be scared to do it. If you're a business person and you're actually an entrepreneur, as a business, you provide things. Whether you provide a service, you provide a physical item, you're selling something, you're bringing something to be bought, right? So figure out what it is that you're trying to provide, figure out how you can provide it, and provide it somewhere that doesn't have a lot of that, you know? You're not going to go to the mall and put the same exact store in the same place unless you are somebody, but you're not going to do that, you know? So there's a lot of things that we can do.
Yeah,
and
stretch yourself.
let's just stop being so trendy. And, you know, it's like every little thing that somebody hears, 10 people are trying to get it right away. And it sucks because it takes away from the people that are really doing the real work. It makes it harder for the people that have been in it. It makes it harder for the people that are going into it with the right intentions. So yeah, man, I would just say, you know, don't be scared. Try a thing always. You won't know until you do it. You're gonna fail. Keep going, but you know, I'm not saying be different, but like just be real with yourself.
Be authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an amazing way to end it. Thank you so much, Ayub. I appreciate you. Where can we find you or your business, anyone who needs to reach out to you for your services, or even, I feel like, even just genuine like mentorship? Like, you have a lot of great background and advice. How can we find you?
Our business, my website from our business, if you are looking for services, we have a referral link. All you got to do is go to our website, click the referral link, fill out the referral form. It'll go straight to my executive assistant or me, and we'll be able to reach out to you and help you get services, whether it's through us or through somebody else. But our website is www.btspectrum.com.
And we'll link that on the YouTube.
And then our Instagram is btspectrum or at btspectrum. Our LinkedIn, Beyond the Spectrum ABA. My personal socials is I think my Instagram is at where you be at. But yeah, you can find us there. If you're looking for services, you can reach out. If you're looking for anything personal, you can reach out to my personal stuff. I'm actually hiring too, so if you have a passion in ABA, or maybe you're in school and you're looking to get into speech therapy, OT, or you have a passion in, you know, psychology, mental health, any of those things, I'm hiring for both of my locations currently, several different positions. So, yeah, you can reach out to us on Indeed, on our website. You can find our email, send your resume, whatever it is. But yeah.
Yeah, that's great to know. And we'll try to provide all of that information on this episode, on our YouTube and on our Instagram. And yes, please feel free to reach out to Ayub if you have any questions. And once again, thank you so much, Ayub, for coming on Eat and Talk. And we look forward to touching base with you again in the future. I'm sure you're going to continue doing a lot of amazing things. And so I want to give you your flowers while you're still alive, and I appreciate you.
Flowers received. Thank you so much.
Thanks
you for sharing your platform, and thank you for doing what you do.
Of course.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.